When will an insurance carrier pay more than policy limits? I'm Tom Friedman. I'm a lawyer in Nevada, and an insurance carrier will pay more than policy limits if a determination is made that the claim was handled improperly and the insurance carrier acted in bad faith. So before losing you with legal mumbo jumbo, we're going to talk about a quick case of how this actually works. Chris crashes the front of his car into the back of Pat's car. Chris is cited by the police for causing the accident, so Chris is liable for the accident. Pat is injured. Pat hires a lawyer and goes to the doctor. Pat starts treating with physical therapy, medications, conservative therapy, and runs up a bill of about $10,000. But Pat is not better. Eventually, Pat goes to a spine doctor, and the spine doctor determines that Pat needs spine surgery. Pat needs a fusion. So what happens next? Well, Pat hires a lawyer. Pat brings a claim against Chris. Chris has auto insurance. Chris bought an auto insurance policy with limits of $100,000. So Pat's lawyer makes a time limit settlement demand to Chris and Chris's insurance company. And Pat's lawyer says, look, Pat's already got $10,000 in past bills. Pat is going to get a spine surgery that costs $100,000, so the bills alone are going to be more than the policy limits. But hey, if you agree to pay the policy limits now, then we will settle the claim. There'll be no lawsuit. The claim goes away completely. Everybody goes home. Well, Chris and his insurance carrier talk about this, and Chris's insurance carrier decides, you know what? We're going to reject this offer, and we're going to go fight this claim. So what happens? The settlement demand is rejected, and Pat has the spine surgery. Unfortunately, Pat's spine surgery does not go well. Pat gets an infection. Pat goes back into the hospital for weeks. Pat gets out of the hospital, but something's still wrong. The spine surgery was a fusion. The fusion didn't take. Now Pat has to go back and have a second surgery, a second fusion, to make sure it works, and the second surgery is successful. So what happens next? Well, Pat's now got $300,000 in medical bills. So Pat talks to the lawyer, and they make a new demand to Chris and Chris's insurance company for $300,000 in past medical bills, $25,000 in lost wages because Pat hasn't been able to work due to the spine problems and the surgeries, and also pain and suffering for $150,000. So what happens? Well, Chris's insurance carrier, let's just call it Stonewall Insurance, says, hey, Chris only purchased $100,000 of insurance. That's all there is. But since the bills are more than $100,000 now, Stonewall is going to offer that $100,000 to settle the case. Well, what happens? Pat and Pat's lawyer look at the $100,000 offer. The medical bills alone are over $300,000. So what do they say? No, they reject the offer. So what's going to happen next? Well, insurance companies do not like paying more than policy limits voluntarily. So there is a small chance they'll pay more to settle the case, but there's also a chance they're going to go to trial because the case can't settle. So in this case, the parties go to trial, and Pat gets a verdict against Chris of $500,000. So what happens next? Well, Stonewall Insurance says, hey, Chris, you bought $100,000 of insurance. We're going to write this check now for $100,000. There you go. We're done. So what happens? Well, there was a $500,000 judgment. The insurance company just paid off $100,000 of it. So there's still a $400,000 judgment remaining. And it's not against the insurance company. It's against Chris. So what's going to happen to Chris? Well, Chris could lose his house. Chris could lose his car. Chris could lose his bank accounts. Chris could have his wages garnished. Lots of bad things can happen to Chris. Chris is not happy. So what can Chris do? Well, there is another option. Pat's lawyer might approach Chris and say, you know what, Chris? Your insurance carrier acted in bad faith, and if you want to assign to me your bad faith claim against the insurance carrier, I'm not going to execute on the judgment. I'm not going to go take your house, take your car, take your bank accounts, and garnish your wages. Well, you know what? Chris might actually be interested in that deal. So what exactly is a bad faith claim? In every contract, the parties to a contract must act in good faith and fair dealing. An insurance policy is considered to be a contract, so both parties have to act in good faith. So what we have here is a very upset Chris because the insurance carrier had an opportunity to settle the case for $100,000 and rejected that offer. And because they rejected the offer, now Chris has a judgment against him for $400,000. So what makes for a bad faith claim or unfair claims practices? Well, first there must be damages to somebody as a result of the act of an unfair practice. In this case, it's $400,000 in damages against Chris. The person making the claim must also demonstrate that the damages arose from the improper claim handling rather than the underlying injury. In this case, the argument would be because the claims handler rejected the offer to settle the case within policy limits. That was the improper claim handling. And so what can you get? Well, you can get, if you win on a case for bad faith, you can get your damages incurred, you can get interest, you can get attorney's fees, you can get consequential damages, possibly even punitive damages. So in this particular case, Chris could bring a bad faith lawsuit with Pat's attorney to save his house and save his money and everything else. And Pat's attorney could then bring a lawsuit against Chris's insurance carrier, Stonewall Insurance, for its improper handling. And then Pat may be able to recover the full amount of damages from the insurance carrier, and Chris keeps all of his stuff. If you have any questions about bad faith or how this works, please feel free to give me a call, drop me an email, and thanks very much for watching.